The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, though nobody on Earth would remember that small detail later. What they would remember was the arrogance dripping from every word. Ambassador Hana Lee stood in the Galactic Council chamber, her hands clasped behind her back as the holographic projection flickered to life. The alien before her was tall, with skin that shimmered like oil on water and eyes that held nothing but contempt. He called himself High Chancellor Vrost, and he spoke as if addressing a disobedient child. "Humanity will surrender all colony worlds within 30 standard days," Frost announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You will cease all military operations. You will pay tribute to the Galactic Dominion as all civilized species do. This is not a negotiation. This is mercy." Hana felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her voice steady. "And if we refuse?" Frost laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was like breaking glass. "Then we will take what should have been given freely. Your species has existed for what? A few thousand years? We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000. You use primitive kinetic weapons. You barely understand quantum physics. You are children playing with fire. Is that a threat?" Hana asked. "It is a promise," Frost replied. 30 days, Ambassador. Choose wisely." The hologram vanished, leaving Hana alone in the dark chamber. She took a deep breath and activated her communicator. "Get me Admiral Dae-hyun. Tell him it's happening." Across the solar system, on a military station orbiting Mars, Admiral Dae-hyun received the message while reviewing fleet deployments. He was a man in his 50s, with gray temples and eyes that had seen too many simulations of exactly this scenario. When his aide delivered the news, he simply nodded. "Activate Protocol, Guardian," he said quietly. "Contact all fleet commanders." "I want the 3rd Fleet at New Busan within 48 hours. Sir, should we begin evacuation procedures?" the aide asked. Dae-hyun shook his head. "No evacuations. The colonists stay. We're not running from this." On Titan, the largest moon of Saturn, Dr. Yuna Park was 3 levels underground when the alert came through. She stood in a laboratory that officially didn't exist, surrounded by weapons that weren't supposed to be possible. The tungsten penetrator rounds gleamed under the harsh lights, each one carefully machined to specifications that had taken 20 years to perfect. "They actually did it," her assistant breathed, reading the message. "They declared war." Yuna didn't look up from her calculations. "Begin production of all systems. Full authorization. I want every railgun platform loaded and ready within 72 hours. She paused, then added, "And activate Hellstorm." "It's time," her assistant paled. "All of them?" "Every single one." In the outer colonies, Captain Jin Woo sat in the command chair of his frigate, the Morning Star. His crew was young, eager, and about to get their first real taste of combat. The Dominion patrol fleet had been shadowing them for 6 hours now, occasionally broadcasting threats and warnings. "They're hailing us again." "Captain," his communications officer reported. "Put them through." The alien face that appeared on screen was reptilian, with scales that caught the starlight. "Human vessel, you are in violation of Dominion space. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded." Jinwoo leaned back in his chair, studying the 5 Dominion ships on his sensors. They were bigger than his frigate, older, decorated with symbols of countless victories. "This is human space," he said calmly. "You're the ones who need to leave." The alien's laugh was harsh. "Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Last warning, human. Surrender or be destroyed." Jinwoo glanced at his weapons officer, who nodded slightly. Every Dominion ship was perfectly positioned, their shields glowing with power, confident and careless. "I need to ask my admiral for permission to engage," Jinwoo said. "Do what you must. You will surrender either way." Jinwoo muted the channel and opened a line to Fleet Command. "Admiral requesting permission to engage hostile vessels." There was a pause, then Dae-hyun's voice came through, tired but firm. "Denied, Captain. Fall back to New Busan. We need every ship for the main event." "Understood, sir." Jinwoo hesitated, then added, "Respectfully, Admiral, they're already painting themselves for us. It seems a shame to waste the opportunity." He could almost hear the smile in Dae-hyun's voice. "Noted, Captain. But orders stand. Fall back." "Yes, sir." Jinwoo closed the channel and looked at the Dominion ships one more time. "Helm, take us out of here. Full burn to New Busan." As the Morning Star turned away, the Dominion ships broadcast their victory across all channels, claiming the humans had fled in terror. Jinwoo listened to their boasts and felt something cold settle in his chest. It wasn't fear. It was anticipation. The 30 days passed slowly. The Dominion assembled their grand fleet at the border, 500 warships that had never known defeat. They broadcast messages to humanity daily, each one more demanding than the last. Surrender, submit, obey. On Earth, the news channels showed civilians going about their lives, seemingly unconcerned. Children went to school. Markets stayed open. Nobody panicked. If the Dominion had been paying attention, they might have found that strange. A species about to be conquered should have been afraid. They weren't watching the military channels, though. They didn't see the fleets moving into position. They didn't notice the defense platforms coming online across every human colony. They didn't understand that humanity had been preparing for this exact scenario since the day they met their first alien species 200 years ago. "You're very calm," Hana said to Dae-hyun as they stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching New Busan grow larger on the view screen. The colony world was beautiful, covered in blue oceans and green continents, home to 3 million humans who had refused evacuation orders. "I've run this simulation 10,000 times, Dae-hyun replied. "We know what they can do. They have no idea what we can do." He turned to face her. "How are the other species reacting?" "They're watching. Some are placing bets on how quickly we'll fall." Hana's voice was bitter. "The consensus seems to be less than a week." "Good," Dae-hyun said. "Let them underestimate us. It's better that way." On the 30th day, the Dominion Grand Fleet crossed into human space. Alarms sounded across every human ship and station. But there was no panic. Just cold, focused purpose. This was what they had trained for. What they had built for. What they had feared and prepared for since humanity first looked up at the stars and realized they weren't alone. The Dominion fleet approached New Busan in perfect formation. Their shields glowing, their weapons charged. They broadcast one final message, giving humanity one last chance to surrender. Admiral Dae-hyun stood on his bridge, surrounded by his crew, and felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. Everything humanity had built, everything they had dreamed of would be decided in the next few hours. He opened the fleet-wide channel, his voice steady and clear. "All ships, this is Admiral Dae-hyun. New Busan Defense Grid, you are authorized to commence target practice. Show them what happens when you threaten our homes. Fire at will." And the guns began to sing. The first volley was almost beautiful. 12 seconds. That's all it took for 47 Dominion warships to simply stop existing. One moment they were there, shields glowing bright, advancing in their perfect formation. The next moment they were expanding clouds of debris and atmosphere, spinning away into the dark. On the Dominion flagship, alarms screamed. Grand Admiral Thek stared at his displays, trying to understand what had just happened. His shields had been at full power. His ships were supposed to be invincible. They had energy barriers that could disperse any beam weapon, any plasma burst, any missile humanity could possibly throw at them. What they couldn't stop were chunks of tungsten moving at 5% of light speed. The railguns fired again, and again. Each shot was invisible until it hit, just a blur of metal moving so fast that it punched through shields like they weren't even there. The Dominion ships tried to return fire, but their enemies were too far away, already moving, using the distances of space as their shield. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Thek shouted, but it was too late. His formations were breaking apart, captains panicking, trying to protect themselves. And that's when the fighters came. Pilot Sora Kim had been waiting for this moment her entire life. She sat in the cockpit of her fighter, part of a wing of 30 craft, each one small and fast and loaded with weapons that the Dominion had never seen before. Her hands were steady on the controls as her squadron leader's voice crackled through the comm. "Hellstorm Wing, you are weapons free. Light them up." Sora smiled and armed her missiles. Each one was called a Hellstorm, and the name fit. When they struck a target, they didn't explode. They opened. 10,000 micro-projectiles, each one smaller than a grain of rice, each one moving fast enough to tear through metal like paper. One missile could shred a destroyer. She was carrying 6. "Target acquired," she said calmly, watching a Dominion cruiser fill her targeting display. "Fox 3. The missile streaked away, covering the distance in seconds. The Dominion ship tried to shoot it down, but it was too small, too fast. When it hit the cruiser's flank, it seemed like nothing happened for just a moment. Then the entire side of the ship came apart. Atmosphere venting, internal structure exposed, secondary. Explosions rippling through its hull. Hit confirmed, Sora reported, already lining up her next target. Splash one. All around her, the rest of Hellstorm Wing was doing the same thing. The Dominion fleet, so confident just minutes ago, was dying. Not slowly. Not honorably. They were being slaughtered. On the Morning Star, Captain Jin Woo watched the battle unfold on his displays and felt a grim satisfaction. The same aliens who had mocked him, who had told him his weapons were useless, were now running. Their shields couldn't stop kinetic weapons. Their armor was too thin. Their tactics were designed to fight enemies who used energy weapons, who played by the same rules they did. Humanity had never been good at following rules. Captain, 3 Dominion destroyers are trying to flank us, his tactical officer reported. Jin Woo studied the display. The destroyers were moving fast, probably trying to get close enough that the railguns couldn't track them. It was actually a smart move. Too bad they didn't know about the other surprise. Activate point defense clusters, Jin Woo ordered. Full auto mode. The Morning Star bristled with small turrets, each one loaded with what looked like simple machine guns. But these weren't firing bullets. They were firing tiny rockets, each one with its own guidance system, each one smart enough to track and kill incoming missiles or fighters, or in this case, ships stupid enough to get close. The 3 destroyers opened fire as they closed, their energy weapons splashing against the Morning Star's shields. The shields held, barely. And then the point defense opened up. Thousands of micro-rockets streaked out, filling the space between the ships. The Dominion captains had maybe 2 seconds to realize their mistake before their ships were torn apart from 1,000 different directions at once. Targets destroyed, the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking slightly. Sir, the Dominion fleet is breaking. They're trying to retreat. Jin Woo looked at the tactical display. Out of 500 ships, only about 200 were still combat capable. The rest were debris or crippled hulks venting atmosphere and begging for rescue. The ones that could still move were burning hard, trying to reach the edge of the system where they could jump to faster-than-light travel. Let them go. Admiral Dae-hyun's voice came over the fleet channel. But make sure they're afraid. Make sure they remember this. Sora Kim and her squadron pursued the fleeing Dominion ships not to destroy them, but to herd them. Every time a ship tried to break formation, they hit it with just enough fire to cripple its engines, forcing it back into the group. The Dominion fleet ran like a school of fish being chased by sharks, desperate and terrified. When they finally reached the jump point and vanished into faster-than-light travel, they left behind 312 wrecked ships and over 50,000 dead. The Battle of New Busan had lasted 18 minutes. On Titan Station, Dr. Yuna Park watched the weapon performance data scroll across her screens. Her assistant was celebrating with the rest of the research team, but she remained focused, her mind already 3 steps ahead. The railguns performed at 98% efficiency, she said, making notes. The Hellstorm missiles exceeded expectations. Point defense clusters need some refinement, but overall success rate was acceptable. Her assistant stopped celebrating and looked at her. Doctor, we just won. Humanity just defeated the Galactic Dominion. Aren't you excited? Yuna finally looked up and her expression was serious. This was just the first battle. They'll adapt. They'll change their tactics, upgrade their ships, maybe even develop their own kinetic weapons. We can't assume this advantage will last forever. She pulled up a new set of files on her display. Begin Protocol Hummingbird. I want the next generation of weapons ready before they come back. You really think they'll come back? They've ruled for 10,000 years, Yuna said quietly. They're not going to let one defeat stop them. No, they'll be back. And they'll be angry. On Earth, the news of the victory spread quickly. People celebrated in the streets, waving flags, shouting with joy. Humanity had faced the ancient empire and won. They were safe. They were strong. They were invincible. But in the military command centers, nobody was celebrating. Admiral Dae-hyun stood in his office reading casualty reports. 53 human fighters had been destroyed. 2 frigates were badly damaged. 817 people were dead or missing. It was nothing compared to what the Dominion had lost, but every single one of those deaths weighed on him. We hurt them, General Mina Choi said, standing across from his desk. She was the commander of all human ground forces, a veteran of conflicts that most people had forgotten. We hurt them badly. Which means they'll want revenge, Daehyun replied. He looked out the window at Mars hanging in the sky, red and distant. They'll come back with everything they have, and next time they won't underestimate us. Good, Mina said. Let them come prepared. We'll be ready. Daehyun nodded slowly. The first battle was over. The first victory was won. But both of them knew the truth. This wasn't the end of the war. It was just the beginning. Far away in the heart of Dominion space, the surviving ships from the Grand Fleet limped into port. News of the defeat spread like wildfire. An empire that had never lost a war, that had crushed dozens of species beneath its heel, had been humiliated by primitives using simple kinetic weapons. The High Council met in emergency session. Fleets were recalled from the outer territories. Weapons researchers were given unlimited budgets. Engineers began designing new shields, new armor, new ways to fight an enemy who didn't play by the established rules of galactic warfare. And at the center of it all, High Chancellor Vrost stood before the assembled might of the Dominion and made a simple declaration. Mobilize the core fleets, all of them. We will not simply defeat humanity. We will erase them. We will make them an example of what happens when you defy the Dominion. This insult will be answered with annihilation. 2,500 warships began preparing for war, the largest fleet ever assembled by the Dominion. Enough firepower to crack planets, to burn solar systems, to end civilizations. They were coming for humanity, and humanity was counting on it. Intelligence Officer Rhea Nam had not slept in 3 days. She sat in her dark office, surrounded by holographic displays showing every piece of data humanity had gathered on the Dominion over the past 200 years. Ship movements, communication patterns, supply routes, cultural behaviors, everything. They're predictable, she said to Fleet Admiral Sung Park, who stood behind her, watching the data scroll past. They've been the dominant power for so long that they've become rigid. They have protocols for everything, and they don't deviate. Sung Park was an older man with gray hair and a face that looked carved from stone. He commanded all human military forces, and he had not gotten to that position by being careless. What are they going to do? Rhea highlighted several star systems on the map. They'll assume we only have kinetic weapons. So they'll develop shields and armor to counter that specific threat. They'll come at us with overwhelming numbers, expecting us to fold under the pressure, and they'll target our most valuable military asset first. Titan Station, Sung Park said. Exactly. They know it's our primary weapons development facility. They'll want to destroy it, cut off our technological advantage. Rhea turned to face him, which means we need to make it look tempting. Make them think it's vulnerable, Sung Park smiled grimly, and then show them it's not. On Titan itself, engineer Taesong was putting the finishing touches on his life's work. The station looked peaceful from the outside, just a collection of research modules and manufacturing facilities orbiting Saturn's largest moon. What nobody outside of a very small circle knew was that every single external sensor array, every communications dish, every piece of equipment that jutted out from the station's hull could rotate inward, and they weren't sensors. They were weapons. How long until they arrive? Taesong asked his team. 12 hours, someone replied. They're bringing the core fleets. 2,500 ships. Taesong nodded and continued his work. 12 hours. Plenty of time to make sure everything was perfect. His hands moved with practiced precision, checking connections, running diagnostics, making tiny adjustments that could mean the difference between victory and death. He had been working on this project for 15 years. The Dominion was about to discover whether it had been worth it. The Dominion core fleets arrived in waves, filling the space around Saturn with enough firepower to glass entire worlds. Their new shields shimmered with a different frequency, adaptive armor that could harden against kinetic impacts. They had studied the Battle of New Busan carefully. They had learned Admiral Thex, who had barely survived that first encounter, now commanded the assault fleet. He had something to prove, a humiliation to avenge. When Titan Station appeared on his sensors, small and alone, he felt a surge of satisfaction. All ships advance, he ordered. Destroy that station. Show them what happens when primitives challenge the Dominion. The fleet moved forward, thousands of ships converging on a single target. On Titan, alarms wailed. Personnel ran to escape pods. The evacuation looked panicked, desperate, exactly as it was supposed to look. Commander Han Lee and his special operations team watched from a distance, hidden in the shadow of one of Saturn's smaller moons. His ship, along with 50 others, was painted in the darkest black humanity could manufacture, coated in materials that absorbed every wavelength of radiation. They were invisible to normal sensors, just shadows in space. "Wait for it," Han Li said softly, watching the Dominion fleet close in on Titan. "Wait for it." The Dominion ships opened fire at maximum range, not wanting to risk getting close to another surprise. Energy beams and missiles streaked across space, hammering into Titan's shields. The shields flickered, weakened, began to fail. The evacuation ships fled in all directions. Civilian vessels running for their lives, Admiral Thex watched with grim pleasure. Finally they were winning. Then Titan Station transformed. Every sensor array, every communications dish, every external piece of equipment rotated smoothly inward, revealing their true nature. They weren't passive instruments. They were focusing arrays for directed energy weapons, each one capable of generating a concentrated gamma-ray burst that could punch through any shield ever designed. Taesong stood in the station's control center, his finger hovering over the activation switch. "For everyone who didn't make it home," he said quietly and pressed the button. Light erupted from Titan Station in every direction at once. Not the visible spectrum, but something far more deadly. Gamma radiation, focused into beams so intense that they made nuclear weapons look gentle. The Dominion ships, clustered together for their assault, had nowhere to run. Their adaptive shields meant nothing. Gamma rays didn't care about kinetic resistance. They passed through armor like it wasn't there, cooking everything inside, turning crews into vapor, melting electronics, causing fusion reactors to lose containment. In the space of 30 seconds, 400 Dominion ships simply died, their hulls intact but everything inside them destroyed. The surviving ships scattered, trying to retreat. But that's when Commander Han Li made his move. "All teams, execute," he said calmly. The 50 shadow ships appeared as if from nowhere, burning hard on intercept courses toward the largest Dominion capital ships. They weren't firing weapons. They were carrying something far more dangerous than missiles: boarding teams. Han Li's ship slammed into the side of a Dominion flagship, magnetic clamps locking on, cutting lasers burning through the hull. His team of 30 soldiers poured through the breach, moving with practiced efficiency. The Dominion crew tried to fight back, but they had never faced anything like this. Humans in powered armor, moving through their ship like ghosts, taking control of critical systems. "Bridge secured," Han Li reported 10 minutes later, standing amid the bodies of the command crew. "Taking control of ship systems now." Across the battlefield, the same scene played out on 3 capital ships. Human teams seized control, locked out the original crews, turned the ship's weapons on their own fleet. The Dominion forces found themselves being fired upon by their own vessels, and the confusion was absolute. Admiral Thex watched his fleet dissolve into chaos and felt something he hadn't felt in decades: fear, real, cold, genuine fear. These weren't primitives. These weren't simple kinetic weapon users. These were predators, and they had been hunting his species since before the war even started. "All ships retreat," he shouted. "Emergency jump now." The Dominion fleet scattered, jumping to faster-than-light travel in every direction, abandoning damaged ships, leaving behind the 3 captured capital ships and over 1,000 wrecked hulls. The core fleets, the pride of the Dominion military, had lost half their strength in less than an hour. On Titan Station, Taesong allowed himself a small smile. "Secure the station," he ordered. "Get damage control teams on those fires, and someone find out if those evacuation ships need any help." "Sir, those weren't real evacuation ships," someone said. "Those were decoys. All personnel were safe in hardened bunkers the entire time." "I know," Taesong replied, "but the Dominion didn't. That's the point." Fleet Admiral Sung Park stood on Earth watching the battle data come in and made a decision. He opened a channel that broadcast across every known communication frequency in the galaxy, on every wavelength, to every species that might be listening. The video showed the Battle of Titan in all its brutal clarity, the Dominion fleet arriving, the gamma-ray weapons firing, the capital ships being captured, the fleet running in terror, and then it showed Sung Park himself standing in his office, speaking in a calm, measured voice. "This message is for the Galactic Dominion," he said. You came to our home. You threatened our families. You declared war on a species that has spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of survival against overwhelming odds. This is what happens next. The video shifted to show a map of Dominion space with every fleet position marked, every supply depot highlighted, every command center identified. We have been watching you for 50 years. We know where every one of your ships is located. We know your supply routes. We know your command structure. We know everything. Sung Park's face reappeared, and now his voice was hard as iron. You wanted a war. You have one. But understand this, we will not simply defend ourselves. We will dismantle your empire piece by piece until you understand that humanity is not prey. We are not subjects. We are the species that climb to the top of a death world's food chain and then look to the stars for new challenges. The broadcast ended with a simple image, a human hand, extended not in peace but holding a weapon. Across the galaxy, other species watched that broadcast and felt something shift. The Dominion had ruled through fear and overwhelming force for millennia. But now, for the first time, they were the ones who were afraid. In the Dominion capital, the High Council met in emergency session once again. The halls were silent. Nobody made excuses. Nobody boasted about easy victory. They had underestimated humanity twice, and twice they had paid the price. High Chancellor Vrost stood before them, and for the first time in his long life, he wasn't sure what to say. They couldn't win this war through conventional means. The humans were too prepared, too clever, too ruthless. We need to consider negotiation, someone said quietly. No, Frost said immediately. If we negotiate now, every species in the galaxy will see it as weakness. They'll rebel. They'll fight us. The Empire will crumble. He looked around the chamber. We have one option left. We deploy the reserve fleets, all 5,000 ships. We hit them everywhere at once, overwhelming force across every human colony. They can't defend everything simultaneously. That will leave our core systems vulnerable, an advisor warned. We won't need to defend anything if humanity is extinct. Frost replied coldly. The order went out. 5,000 ships pulled from garrison duty across the entire empire began mobilizing. The largest fleet ever assembled. Enough to end this war once and for all. On Earth, Rhiannon watched the Dominion fleets begin to move and smiled. They're doing exactly what we predicted, she said. Good, Admiral Dae-hyun replied, standing beside her. Then they'll be exactly where we want them. The war was about to enter its final phase. The Dominion offered a ceasefire 3 days after the Battle of Titan. Their ambassador appeared on every human communication channel, speaking words of peace and negotiation. Perhaps, he suggested, there had been misunderstandings. Perhaps both sides could find common ground. Prime Minister Gina Kang listened to the entire message in her office on Earth, surrounded by her military advisors and civilian leaders. When it ended, she was quiet for a long moment before speaking. No, she said simply. Ma'am? One of her advisors asked, surprised. Gina looked around the room, her expression hard. You don't negotiate after someone attacks you. You don't make peace with an empire that wanted to enslave your entire species. You ensure it never happens again. She stood up, smoothing her jacket. Send a message back. Tell them we decline their offer. Tell them we're coming for them. Admiral Dae-hyun, standing near the window, nodded with grim approval. Operation Reckoning is ready to launch. All strike teams are in position. Then begin, Gina said. Show them what happens when you threaten Earth. In deep space, far from any star system, Captain Nari Jang sat in the command chair of the Silent Thunder. Her ship was something new, something that humanity had been building in secret for 30 years. It didn't look like a traditional warship. It was sleek, black, covered in materials that bent light and absorbed radiation. On sensors, it simply didn't exist. All systems ready, Captain, her executive officer reported. FTL interdiction field is primed. Dr. Junbei confirms we're ready to deploy. Nari nodded and pulled up the tactical display. 20 other ships like hers were positioned throughout Dominion space, invisible shadows waiting to strike. Their mission was simple but brutal. Hunt down every major Dominion warship and destroy them. Target the fortress ship Eternal Victory, Nari ordered. It's carrying 3,000 crew and serves as the mobile command center for their second fleet. Dr. Bay, prepare the interdiction field. Dr. Junbei worked at his station nearby, his hands moving across holographic controls. He was thin, nervous, brilliant, and he had just invented a technology that could change warfare forever. The FTL interdiction field could trap ships trying to jump to faster-than-light travel, pulling them back into normal space. It meant that Dominion ships trying to escape or reinforce each other would instead find themselves stuck, helpless, waiting to be destroyed. "Field ready," Junbei reported. "Activating in 3, 2, 1. Space itself seemed to twist as the invisible field expanded outward. 500 light-years away, the Eternal Victory and its escort fleet tried to jump to assist another Dominion force. Instead, they dropped back into normal space, their drives screaming in protest, their sensors showing nothing but empty void. Then the void opened fire. The Silent Thunder and 3 sister ships materialized from nowhere, already firing. Railguns tore through the surprised escorts. Hellstorm missiles shredded armor. The Eternal Victory, one of the legendary fortress ships that had never been defeated in 4,000 years, lasted less than 5 minutes. Target destroyed. Nari reported calmly, watching the massive ship break apart. Moving to next target. "How many more on our list?" 47 capital ships in this sector alone, her tactical officer replied. "Then we have work to do," Nari said. "Cloak us and move to intercept point Delta. Let's keep hunting." Across Dominion space, the same scene played out dozens of times. Shadow ships appearing from nowhere, destroying their targets, vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. The Dominion's legendary fleet, which had crushed so many species before, was being systematically taken apart. And it wasn't just ships. Human strike teams, led by Commander Han Lee, hit supply depots, manufacturing facilities, command centers. They moved like ghosts, striking hard and fast before disappearing. The Dominion military, built on the assumption that they would always have superiority, found themselves fighting an enemy that didn't care about fair fights or honorable combat. On a fuel depot orbiting a gas giant, Han Lee and his team set explosive charges that would take out enough fuel to cripple a dozen fleets. As they worked, one of his soldiers asked a question. "Commander, why are we being so brutal? We've already won most of the battles. Why not accept their surrender?" Han Lee paused in his work, thinking about how to answer. "Because," he said finally, "if we accept their surrender now, they'll rebuild. They'll come back in 100 years or 1,000, and they'll remember that they almost won. They'll try again." He set another charge, his movements precise. "But if we break them completely, if we tear apart everything they've built, then they'll teach their children to fear us. They'll tell stories about what happens when you threaten humanity, and maybe, just maybe, no one else will be stupid enough to try." The explosives were set. The team evacuated. Behind them, the depot erupted in a fireball visible from 3 star systems away. As the Dominion reeled from the attacks, something unexpected happened. Other species, ones that had been conquered and controlled by the Dominion for centuries, began to rise up. They sent secret messages to humanity, asking for help, for weapons, for training. Ambassador Hana Lee, who had been mocked and dismissed at the start of the war, suddenly found herself the most popular person in the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of species wanted to meet with her, to join what they were calling the Galactic Alliance. "They want us to teach them how to fight," she reported to Prime Minister Gina during a secure call. "They want our weapons, our tactics, our strategies. Give them defensive technology," Gina decided after a moment's thought. "Shields, armor, point defense systems, things they can use to protect themselves. But keep the offensive capabilities secret. We share how to defend but not how to attack." "Why?" Hana asked. "Because we're not trying to create an empire," Gina replied. "We're trying to prevent anyone from ever building one again. We protect, we defend, but we don't conquer. That's the line we won't cross." The message was clear, and it spread throughout the galaxy. Humanity would help those who wanted to be free, but they wouldn't replace one empire with another. It was a message that resonated with species who had lived under the Dominion's boot for millennia. Fleet Admiral Sung Park stood in his command center, watching the strategic map of the galaxy. Red dots showed Dominion positions. Blue dots showed human forces. And now green dots were appearing, allied species joining the fight. The map was changing, the balance of power shifting. "The Dominion still has their reserve fleets," Admiral Dae-hyun said, standing beside him. 5,000 ships. "They're holding them back, probably waiting for the right moment to strike." "Let them wait," Sung Park said. He pulled up another display, this one showing real-time tracking data of every single Dominion vessel. "We know where every one of their ships is located. We've been tracking them for months. When they finally decide to move, we'll be ready." A communication came in from Dominion space. It was High Chancellor Vrost himself, looking older and more tired than in previous broadcasts. "I wish to negotiate the terms of our surrender," Vrost said simply. Sung Park studied the alien's face, looking for deception, for tricks. "Unconditional surrender," he said. "Complete demilitarization. Opening of all Dominion archives so we can learn what you've done to other species. War reparations paid to every species you've conquered, and you personally step down from power." Frost was silent for a long moment. "And if I refuse?" Sung Park gestured, and the display behind him changed to show the real-time tracking data. Every Dominion ship, every station, every military installation, all of them targeted, all of them ready to be destroyed simultaneously. "Then we turn your reserve fleets into debris," Sung Park said calmly. "We've been tracking them since they left port. We know their exact coordinates. We have ships in position. With one order, I can destroy 5,000 vessels before their crews even know they're under attack." He leaned forward. "You have two choices, Chancellor. Surrender now or watch your entire military cease to exist. You have 1 hour to decide." The transmission ended. In the command center, nobody spoke. They had reached the moment where the war would either end or escalate into something that would kill millions more. 59 minutes later, the response came back. "We surrender," Frost said, and his voice was hollow. "Unconditional surrender. All terms accepted. The war was over. 90 days after it had started, the Galactic Dominion's 10,000-year reign had ended. Not with a final battle, not with a dramatic last stand, but with a defeated empire simply giving up because they had run out of options. On Earth, people celebrated in the streets. On the colonies, families held memorials for the dead. In the military command centers, officers began the long process of transitioning from war to peace. But Captain Nari Jang, sitting in her still-cloaked ship in deep space, didn't celebrate. She looked at her crew and saw the same exhaustion, the same relief, the same wariness. "Stay alert," she told them. "Keep the ship ready. Keep the weapons hot." "Captain, the war is over," someone said. "This war is over," Nari corrected. "But there will be others. There are always others. And next time, we need to be ready before it starts, not after." She looked out at the stars, at the vast galaxy full of unknown threats and potential enemies. Humanity learned something important today. The best way to win a war is to make sure everyone else is too afraid to start one. The silent thunder remained hidden in the dark, watching, waiting, a silent guardian that the galaxy would never see but would always fear. The surrender ceremony took place on a neutral station at the edge of Dominion space. High Chancellor Vrost arrived with a small escort, his ships disarmed, his pride shattered. He walked through corridors lined with soldiers from a dozen different species, all of them watching the once mighty ruler with expressions ranging from satisfaction to open hatred. Prime Minister Gina Kang waited for him in a simple conference room, not a grand hall. There would be no ceremony, no speeches, no attempt to make this moment anything other than what it was. The end of an empire. "The terms," Frost said as he sat down, not bothering with pleasantries. Gina slid a datapad across the table. "Complete demilitarization. Your fleets will be reduced to peacekeeping forces only. Your weapons manufacturing will be monitored. You will open all government archives to a joint investigation committee, and you will pay reparations to every species you conquered, enslaved, or destroyed." Frost read through the terms, his expression growing darker with each line. "This will bankrupt our civilization." "You should have thought of that before declaring war," Gina replied without sympathy. "You have ruled through fear and violence for 10,000 years. That ends now. You will spend the next 1,000 years making amends, or we will ensure you spend them in ruins. Your choice." Frost signed the document, his hand shaking with either rage or fear. When it was done, he looked up at Gina with eyes full of hatred. "This humiliation will not be forgotten." "Good," Gina said calmly. "That's exactly the point. Remember this feeling. Remember what happened when you threatened peaceful species, and teach your children to never make the same mistake." She stood up. "You're dismissed, Chancellor. Or should I say, former Chancellor. As per the agreement, you're stepping down from power." Vrost left without another word, his shoulders slumped, his pride destroyed. Behind him, The Galactic Dominion began the painful process of becoming just another nation, no longer the rulers of the galaxy. Admiral Dae-hyun retired 3 months after the war ended. He stood on the bridge of his flagship one last time, looking out at the stars, and felt the weight of 90 days of combat finally lift from his shoulders. He had commanded fleets through impossible battles. He had made decisions that saved millions of lives. He had never lost a single ship under his direct command. "You're really leaving?" Captain Jinwoo asked, standing beside him. Jinwoo had been promoted twice during the war, and now commanded his own task force. "It's time," Dae-hyun said. "The war is over. We need peacetime leaders now, not warriors." He turned to face the younger man. "You'll do fine. You've learned everything I can teach you. The rest you'll figure out on your own. What will you do? Go home, see my family. Maybe teach at the academy. Let someone else worry about the galaxy for a while." Dae-hyun smiled slightly. "Though I suspect I'll be bored within a month." They shook hands, and Dae-hyun walked off the bridge for the last time. Behind him, the next generation of officers prepared to take over, ready to protect humanity's future. Dr. Yuna Park did not retire. She threw herself into new projects with the same intensity she had shown during the war. But now, instead of weapons of destruction, she focused on something different. She became the head of the Galactic Defense Initiative, a research coalition that included scientists from 30 different species. "We're going to share our defensive technology," she announced at the first meeting. "Shields, armor, sensor systems, anything that can help protect civilian populations. But we're not sharing offensive weapons. We're not creating an arms race, and why help us at all?" A alien scientist asked. "You won. You could dominate the galaxy if you wanted to." Yuna looked at the gathered representatives and thought about all the lives lost during the war, all the death and destruction. "Because we don't want to be conquerors. We want to be neighbors. Good neighbors help each other survive. They don't exploit each other's weaknesses." The coalition began its work, developing technologies that would protect peaceful species from future threats. It was slow, difficult work, but it was important. More important in its way than any weapon Yuna had ever designed. Captain Jinwoo became an instructor at the military academy, teaching young officers from Earth and other allied species. His classes were always full, students eager to learn from someone who had fought in the war. But what he taught wasn't just tactics or weapon systems. "The most important thing to understand about combat," he told his students, "is that it should always be the last option. We won the war because we were prepared, yes, but we also won because we knew what we were fighting for. Not conquest, not glory. Survival and the protection of those who couldn't protect themselves." One of his students, a young pilot from a species that had been freed from Dominion rule, raised her hand. "How do we know when to fight?" "When everything else has failed," Jinwoo replied. "When negotiation won't work. When retreat means death. When the only choice left is to stand and defend what matters. That's when you fight. And when you do, you fight with everything you have, holding nothing back, because the lives of everyone behind you depend on your victory." Pilot Sora Kim led the first Joint Species Patrol Squadron, a mix of human and alien fighters working together to protect trade routes and respond to emergencies. It was strange at first, flying alongside species that had been enemies just months before, but gradually trust built, skills were shared, friendships formed. "We're not soldiers anymore," she told her squadron during their first mission briefing. "We're peacekeepers. Our job isn't to win wars, it's to prevent them from starting. That means we fly smart, we communicate clearly, and we treat every situation as an opportunity to prove that cooperation works better than conflict." The squadron's first mission was to investigate a distress call from a civilian transport under attack by pirates. When they arrived, Sora's mixed species team worked together with perfect coordination, rescuing the transport without firing a single shot. The pirates took one look at the organized response and surrendered immediately. It was a small victory, nothing like the battles of the war. But it mattered. Intelligence Officer Rhea Nam was the one who uncovered the full truth about the Dominion's history. She spent months going through their archives, reading reports that went back thousands of years, and what she found chilled her to the bone. 147 species, she reported to the Galactic Alliance Council. The Dominion destroyed 147 different civilizations over the course of their history. Some were conquered and enslaved. Others were simply wiped out when they refused to submit. And all of it was documented, filed away, treated as routine administrative work. The council chamber was silent as she continued. We need to make sure this never happens again. Not just to humanity, but to anyone. We need to create a system where aggression like this becomes impossible. The result was the formation of the Galactic Defense Treaty, an agreement where member species would come to each other's aid if attacked. It wasn't perfect. Some species refused to join, preferring isolation, but enough signed on that the balance of power in the galaxy shifted permanently. Earth constructed a monument that became one of the most visited sites in human space. The Wall of Warnings was a massive structure made of black stone, inscribed with the names of every species the Dominion had destroyed. 147 civilizations, billions of individuals, all gone. Below the names was a simple message in every known language: never again, not to us, not to anyone. Prime Minister Gina Kang gave the dedication speech, standing before representatives from across the galaxy. We built this wall not to celebrate our victory, she said, but to remember the cost of allowing tyranny to grow unchecked. Every name on this wall represents a species that could have been our friends, our trading partners, our allies. Instead, they're memories, warnings, reminders that peace requires constant vigilance. She paused, looking at the gathered crowd. The Dominion thought we were primitive because we still used kinetic weapons. They thought we were weak because we hadn't built an empire. But they misunderstood something fundamental about humanity. We don't build empires. We build communities. We don't seek to dominate. We seek to protect. And when someone threatens us or our neighbors, we respond with everything we have. The ceremony ended with a moment of silence for all the dead, human and alien alike, who had paid the price for the galaxy's freedom. 20 years passed. A new generation grew up knowing the war only as history, something their parents and grandparents had lived through. The galaxy was different now, more connected, more cooperative. The Dominion still existed, but as a shadow of its former self, slowly rebuilding under careful supervision. And then a new threat emerged. An empire from a distant sector of the galaxy, one that had never encountered humanity before, began expanding aggressively. They attacked young civilizations, enslaved populations, acted exactly as the Dominion once had. Their war fleet, 500 strong, crossed into what they thought was undefended territory. They were met by a single human ship, Captain Narijang's Silent Thunder, now the flagship of a small fleet of shadow vessels. The enemy commander broadcast a standard demand for surrender. Narijang's response was 3 words, broadcast across all frequencies: remember New Busan. The enemy commander didn't understand the reference, but within minutes his sensor showed something impossible. 1,000 ships appearing from nowhere, human vessels joined by allies from dozens of species, all of them armed with weapons that the enemy had never seen before. The enemy fleet surrendered without firing a shot. The message spread quickly through their empire, humanity, the species that had destroyed the Galactic Dominion in 90 days, the species that protected the weak and punished the aggressive, the species that, if provoked, would respond with overwhelming force. The would-be conquerors abandoned their expansion plans and sued for peace. They had learned the lesson that the Dominion had learned too late. Some enemies aren't worth making. Ambassador Hana Lee, now Secretary General of the Galactic Alliance, addressed the new empire's leadership via hologram. She looked older now, with gray in her hair and lines around her eyes, but her voice was as steady as ever. 20 years ago, someone made the mistake of declaring war on humanity, she said. They called it conquest. We called it self-defense. They thought they would win easily. Instead, they became an object lesson for every aggressive species in the galaxy. She leaned forward. You have a choice. Join the peaceful galaxy we're building or become the next lesson. We don't want war. We've seen enough death to last a lifetime. But if you force our hand, we will respond, and you will not enjoy what happens next. The enemy agreed to peace terms within a week. Back on Earth in a small classroom at the military academy, Captain Jin Woo finished his lecture for the day. His students, both human and alien, listened carefully as he spoke his final words. Remember this, he said. Strength isn't about how many ships you have or how powerful your weapons are. It's about knowing when to fight and when to show mercy, It's about being so prepared for war that everyone else chooses peace instead. The best victory is the one you win without fighting. But when fighting becomes necessary, make sure you fight for something worth protecting. Make sure future generations remember why you stood your ground. He dismissed the class and watched them file out, young officers ready to protect a galaxy that their predecessors had fought to save. The war was long over. The peace was holding, and humanity, the species that had climbed from a death world to the stars, stood watch to make sure it stayed that way. In orbit above Earth, a training exercise continued. Railguns fired at distant targets. Fighters practiced maneuvers. Crews ran through combat drills with the same intensity they had shown during the war, because humanity had learned the most important lesson of all. The only way to ensure peace is to never stop preparing for war, and the best way to avoid conflict is to make sure everyone else knows exactly what will happen if they start one. The galaxy remembered Nu, Busan. The galaxy remembered Titan. The galaxy remembered what happened when an ancient empire declared war on humanity and called it target practice, and the galaxy chose peace.